This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thanks for watching this week's NC Spin. The gloves are off, and this show talks about three big battles in our state. We begin with the fight with the legislative and executive branches over the state budget and check on what progress is being made. Next, move to the battle between two doctors in the Republican primary runoff in the 3rd District. Discuss President Trump's upcoming visit to Greenville and look at the U.S. Senate race. Then we shift our battle between our state treasurer and hospitals over the state health plan and try to sort out this heavyweight contest. And as always, we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Speaking of the panel, joining us this week are John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, Joe Mavretic, former House Speaker, Brenda Pollard, political analyst, we welcome you to the show, and Chris Fitzsimon, the director of the Newsroom. We begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Let's get started. Not a lot happened in our legislature last week due to the July 4th falling on a Thursday, but Governor Cooper's veto of the budget, passed by both the House and the Senate, has set off another battle between the executive and legislative branches. As we said on our June 28th show, the question is whether lawmakers can scare up enough Democrats to vote to override the veto. Brenda Pollard, this is putting some Democrats in a bind. Do they support their governor and the Democratic caucus and keep the veto in place, or do they vote to pass a budget that has pay raises for teachers and state employees in their districts? What's your predictions? What's going to happen?
The Democrats in 2018 had the supermajority, and they have forgotten their constituents and the people that put them in office. So they're going to stand with their governor. He is leading the way. He's leading the charge for the issues that are important to the citizens.
Joe, there were no votes taken to override this past week.
I'm not so sure I agree with Brenda on this one. Let's say I'm a House member and I vote what's best for my district, and I voted for the budget. Now the governor comes back and vetoes it and says, I'm smarter than you, I know better than you. And he comes back to me and I say, wait a minute, I know what's best for my district. I know how I voted the first time, and this is not a team player issue. I got to run again in my district, so I'm going to vote the same way I voted before. That's what I believe.
Okay, but they've got to flip some additional votes, though, in order to be able to do that. And my understanding is that they're about 4 votes short in the House. And Chris, we had an unusual development this past week. It almost sounded like Monty Hall and Let's Make a Deal. Democrats were reporting that they were sort of getting teased with the idea that maybe the Department of Health and Human Services might consider relocating to their district
I thought this was one of the more, we all have talked a lot about politics, and you trade and you do things and you wink and nod and maybe a road gets moved up on the plan. But literally to relocate the largest state agency in state government based on how one vote is on a veto thing, I think is extraordinary and outrageous. And thank goodness that none of the wavering Democrats are in Pasquotank County, or we'd have to move it all the way to the northeastern part of the state.
Yeah, or Watauga.
I mean, this is. I mean, you can make deals and you can do things, but I think this shows you the extent of it. It also shows you the desperation, I think, in the House leadership. There's a significant number of Democrats they believe they could have gotten are not right now wavering nearly as much as you think. And I think some of them, not to their credit, are playing the media and are enjoying the attention, and privately are saying that I'm not going to be voting with the House.
But there were a lot of Democrats that got some pork in that budget for pet projects. Right. John, so the House passed a temporary funding bill on Wednesday. which didn't have pay raises for state employees or teachers or any of that kind of stuff. It had enrollment increases for schools and various
money to implement the age system, and
Right.
a subsequent bill will have money to do the Medicaid transformation implementation. They're going to do a series of these stopgap, supplemental, or one-off bills, probably including the pay raises at some point, and dare the governor just veto a series of bills.
Okay.
Let me just be clear about this. The legislature thinks that they are in the strong position. The governor's in the weak position. The budget's already in place. There are some non-recurring things that aren't funded, but the recurring functions of state government are going to be funded, even if no budget is enacted. There are some things they want to do. They're going to do those in separate bills. They think the governor is ultimately going to have to seriously.
But does that,
I don't think that's true, but go ahead.
Does that, the fact that they passed this temporary funding bill, and it's got to go over to the Senate, of course, but does that say to you, Joe, I mean, you're a veteran of the legislature, does that say to you, we don't think we're going to be able to get enough votes to do this?
I think it says we don't know, and here's a fallback position. And I think it's really great legislative branch strategy. And this is what we're talking about. Go ahead.
Well, ironically, the big issue, one of the big issues we've talked about in the show
You're being so polite.
is Medicaid. Well, is Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
The House committee voted 25-6 not to expand Medicaid the way the governor wants, but to expand coverage under Medicaid, which is one of the biggest issues. I think it's the fundamental issue that's holding this things up now. So now an overwhelming majority of a key House committee has already signaled we want to do this in some ways that you want to do it. I think that's a fascinating development we haven't talked enough about. It's on the calendar. Clearly, there's some sentiment in the House to do this.
It is connected to the override. Okay, there are some Democrats who might say, well, I will vote to override the budget if you will give us a floor vote on Medicaid expansion.
Absolutely.
Now I'm not
haven't had
sure.
one yet.
Now I'm not sure that they are serious, and I'm not sure the Republicans think they're serious, but we'll see.
But Brenda, are they hooked together? Is it possible there could be separate votes here?
There is an issue that they haven't really come together, and that's why they are adjourned at the present time. They're talking. They're trying to get the votes together, which they don't have together, and we'll see what happens next week. It's in flux.
Yeah, so I remember we went to Asheville in '89 for a week, and there was a whole lot of backdoor maneuvering for those 5 days.
God, I remember your session in '89. I thought it was going to last
and
forever.
So
we spent Labor Day in the legislature.
And I love the dance. I mean, I love the dance,
just keep
and
in
so
mind-
does the media. But sooner or later, we'll get it resolved.
Sooner or later, but in this case, if you want to go see the Senate leadership, you don't go to Asheville. You go to Germany, which is a little bit further away.
The irony of the week to me was that the Republicans went crazy that Governor Cooper went to New York for half a day, and Senator Berger and Senator Brown, who, by the way, is not the president pro tem of the Senate, went with Senator Berger to
But is
Berlin.
in waiting.
Well,
Let's
but
say
I'm just
that.
saying,
He's
in the
in-
middle of a budget negotiation, after you criticize the governor for going to New York for 3 hours, you're gone for 4 days to Germany.
It was the other way around, though, Chris. The criticism had already been lodged that Berger was going to be out of the country, and they said, well, the person who's lodging the criticism is out of the state right now.
Right, for a day.
I understand.
come
All
on.
right, so I want to go around the table very quickly. Where are we headed with all this? I mean, when are we going to get a budget, John?
I think we will have a budget, but I'm not sure it will be before the end of the summer. And I think that the budget will ultimately be somewhere in between the governor's position and the legislature's position on a number of matters, but not Medicaid, which the legislature's just not
So
going to do.
you don't think they're going to do Medicaid?
No.
The Senate is dug in on
They're
that.
simply not
Joe,
going to do
where
it.
are we headed? What's going on? When are we going to get a budget?
I'm with John, except I think on an earlier show I said Thanksgiving and, keep your pumpkin, and I don't think Medicaid is going to be in it.
All right. Brenda, what do you think?
I think that I've heard that the session will adjourn on July 22nd. And I think next week is going to be a telling week, and that the leadership will come together. But
that July 22nd, my understanding is just going to be, it's not going to be sine die or anything like that. I mean, it's going to be, we're coming back in August.
We're coming back in August, but back to the point, that Medicaid is, that the governor is sticking firm on Medicaid.
Interesting. What do you think?
I mean, I think the governor has some more rhetorical advantages now. With Republicans are on the record voting for their own version of Medicaid expansion in a committee. It's on the House calendar. I think they're a little bit underestimating the resolve here, and we'll see what happens.
In all the midweek July 4th holiday preparations, another big battle in our state was kind of overshadowed. We're talking about the contest between the state health plan and the hospitals. Treasurer Dale Falwell, who oversees the largest health insurance plan in North Carolina, has grown weary of not being able to get transparency from hospitals over the charges they make his members. And he's instituted what he calls the clear pricing plan, whereby he will tell care providers what the plan will pay them for procedures. Now, as you can expect, this wasn't sitting well with hospitals. They formed a group called the North Carolina Healthcare Association to oppose the new state health plan initiative. Now, I've got to do some disclosure here. To be fully transparent, we need to disclose that Partners in Innovation in Healthcare, part of that group, has been an underwriter of our show on NC Spin. However, none of their messages have dealt with this controversy. We also need to disclose that both panelists, Brenda Pollard and Joe Mavretic, are retired state employees and enjoy the benefits from the state health plan and the state retirement system. Joe Mavretic, some people say this has just turned into a game of chicken between the treasurer and the hospitals, and do you agree? So with a January date to implement this new plan, how do you see this turning out?
Well, first of all, I don't agree that it's a game of chicken. I think this is a serious game, and I think it's one of the most understood and appreciated fights in this state. The state health plan has over 700,000 members. So that's 1 in 15 North Carolinians. And I was the chairman of Pensions and Retirement and Health Benefits for 6 years, and I've been tracking this issue for 35 years. And I got to tell you that Dale Falwell is on the right course, that transparency is exactly what we need. You need to know how much you're going to pay for whatever you're going to get. And the hospitals are going to fight this tooth and nail because this is an old model versus a new model.
John, this is not all black and white. I mean, if you really drill down into this issue, it seems to me both sides have some right to their positions here. Falwell wanted transparency, as Joe alluded. The hospital said, wait a minute, it ain't as simple as that. There's a lot involved insofar as pricing of procedures and so forth like that. He said, well, if you're not going to give me transparency and tell me what you're charging, I'm going to tell you what I pay, which is essentially Medicare plus 82%. The hospital said, hey, that'll wreck our finances. We can't, I mean, if you do that, it'll take $465 million away from hospitals. Can both of them be right?
Well, the statements you just said are correct, that they wouldn't bankrupt the hospitals. That's silly, but it certainly would reduce their revenues quite a lot. And in some places, it might put the hospitals in significant trouble. In other places, it would reduce their profit margins. If it was a debate about how much, then I think the hospital should have responded with an alternative fee structure. They don't want to give in on anything, and let's keep two things in mind. Number one, tens of thousands of providers have said yes. Okay, the health plan doesn't just pay hospitals; it pays
65,000 to be specific.
Yeah, tens of
and
thousands,
mostly doctors.
Right,
yeah.
But so lots of providers have said yes. The hospitals, for the most part, I mean, I think they've stuck together. Some are more insistent than others, but the bottom line here is the hospitals are playing with a weak hand. They believe they have a strong hand. They are well funded, but they are not liked. They are not a sympathetic client. The association does not have a sympathetic client. The state health plan and state employees as beneficiaries of what Dale Falwell's trying to do, ultimately, in my view, will prevail. There might be some in-between compromise that happens, but at this point, the treasurer has put out his marker. The hospitals need to get serious about this. They are going to win just by saying no.
This thing is getting really ugly. The guy who was head of associate finance for Moses Cone Hospital wrote an email to the treasurer and a number of lawmakers saying, well, I hope you burn in hell, you SOBs.
Well, at least he's being cordial about it.
I mean,
well, that's obviously ridiculous, and that guy should be, if not lose his job, should certainly be disciplined. You can't. I don't think you should communicate with anybody like that over email as an official of a public institution, a quasi-public institution. But I also think the state treasurer is not without blame here in the way he's handled it. There are ways to do this that I think this has been a little heavy-handed. I think he's been a little arbitrary. I think he would be a lot smarter to figure out some sort of at least bipartisan, ideally, or at least have some in-depth hearings, let the public understand, let state employees understand what's happening. One of the things I always find fascinating, and maybe this is all he can do in this job, he's taken one little piece out of this giant healthcare puzzle and saying, we're going to save all this money. That's what he's doing, which, okay, maybe that's a good idea for taxpayers. But for the people on the state health plan, for hospitals, for the other giant part of the healthcare system, it starts to collapse on itself.
And I think as the fiduciary for 700,000 state employees, isn't that really his mission?
Well, okay, but is it his mission when a state employee shows up at a hospital in 6 months and can't get in because it's out of network and they can't afford it? I mean, you can't just make one adjustment. You have to have everybody on board. It's a political struggle as well as a financial struggle. He's playing the financial part well. I don't think he's playing the political part well.
And Brenda, one of the criticisms, and I think it's where you're getting, is there really hasn't been any good communication between these two sides, honest communications. Right. The House passed a bill, HB 184, which would delay the implementation of this plan. The Senate won't take it up. Where's that going? Anywhere?
I think, to address the other gentleman's comments, that the plan is a clear pricing proposal. People have entered in on the conversation. Perhaps that is an idea that the treasurer needs to look at, is to have a more in-depth conversation with the citizens. But he is for transparency, and the hospitals are fighting that with campaign after campaign.
But it looks, Joe, this transparency issue, and certainly I don't propose waging this in the media or in public necessarily, but honestly sitting down and having some honest conversation. This is a problem which is a long-term problem. I mean, we've had this issue for a long time.
Oh, yeah. It goes back to at least 1983. But Chris's point about this is just one piece of a puzzle, that you got to look at the whole puzzle. The problem is that if you don't address a piece of the puzzle, you will never get to the whole puzzle. And somewhere it has to start. And Dale Folwell, whether you like him or not, has the courage and the candor to say, this is a big part of the puzzle for my constituency, 700,000 North Carolinians, and I'm going to address it. And now everybody has to start thinking about it.
John, let's play what if here. What if the two sides can't come together? The legislature doesn't block this from being implemented. Come January 1, we've got some 65,000 providers, as you say, that have mostly doctors that have signed up for this. 3 hospitals, not major large hospitals, but hospitals. So all of a sudden this goes into effect January 1. State employees go to the hospital and it's an out-of-network kind of situation in which essentially the plan is going to pay them 70% of the cost. They're going to have to foot the bill for the other 30%. How's that going to settle with these state employees?
Well, they will be furious. As we all know, they will be furious. The question is, who will they blame? Will they blame?
Who are they going to be mad at?
Will they blame the state treasurer? Will they blame the state legislature? Will they blame the hospital? I mean, there'll be some blame that goes around, but I think the hospitals will get the brunt of the blame, and they need to understand that. They do not have a winning hand here.
Interesting.
Tom, the other side of this is that, and I'm going to side with John here on issues that have been with him for years, that market tests are good ideas. And if there is ever a market test available in North Carolina starting January 1 about pricing for medical services, this is the market test. Does the clear plan proposed by the state treasurer prevail? Do a lot of people like it? And do the big hospitals have to come on board or not?
Think about it in places like Charlotte or Raleigh or Greensboro or Wilmington, where there are multiple hospitals. The hospital that says yes will get all of the business of all the state employees.
Too right.
And I mean, they just need to think this through a little more carefully.
But one of the things hospitals I think say, and I'm not a giant fan of hospitals, but I do think they have a strong point of view, as you mentioned. I think this is a complicated issue. Is if you're going to lay out how much it costs to do one specific procedure in a hospital, the hospitals, I believe, would tell you, let's lay out all those procedures we do for people without insurance.
Yeah.
Let's put that cost on the table. Yeah. And what does Treasurer Falwell think we should do in rural North Carolina when we have thousands of people a year come in and need serious services and there's no cost to that? How do we deal with that?
No. He already has an extraordinary base, and it's called Medicaid.
Medicaid
and Medicare have pricing for procedures, and that's
and the legislature sets that price and can reduce it to save money and has.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, do you have a base list somewhere? Well, yes, you do.
Well, but what
at
about
the national level?
They can't keep saying unpaid, uncompensated care is the story. It's not a large enough amount to explain all of this stuff.
That's right.
It's like this 1995, and they think no one has grown up. and they haven't looked at the numbers
I
about
think they're
uncompensated
plenty
care.
grown.
But to add to that, President Donald Trump 3 weeks ago signed an executive order for transparency. So
Yeah, but it ain't as simple as it sounds. I'm not taking sides in
Her
this.
point is that it is a national.
It's a national issue.
It's a national conservative talking point as well. That's
not
one
only
of the
that,
other things it is.
when you factor in the fact that this state's getting ready to go into managed care, we're talking about Medicaid expansion. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is having a hearing on Obamacare and whether or not it is constitutional, along with changes that are taking place in the Medicaid, Medicare system to start off with. This really becomes a very complicated issue.
It's a festering wound, and it's going to be addressed. And Falwell has made sure we're going to address a part of it now.
Well, I don't need to move on. North Carolina politics isn't as hot as the weather we've experienced lately, but things have been warming up. On Tuesday, voters in 17 eastern counties cast ballot in the 3rd Congressional District Republican primary runoff. Dr. Greg Murphy from Greenville and Dr. Joan Perry from Kinston were the candidates, vying to replace the late Walter Jones. The week before, we learned President Trump's coming to Greenville. Candidates have been filing in municipal elections. It is really beginning to heat up. Let's start with that runoff election. John Hood, the closing week of the runoff got really heated. There were a lot of charges and countercharges going back and forth from both Joan Perry and Greg Murphy. The outcome wasn't as close, though, as many had thought it was going to be. 60% for Murphy, roughly 40% for Perry. What happened?
Well, it wasn't funding. I mean, there was expenditures on plenty of money spent on both sides to have accomplished the outcome, but Murphy won easily. I think that shows the value of being a legislator for some period of time in the core of the media market in the district. I think that was helpful to him. I think that some of the national conservative Republicans coming in on his behalf was helpful
Freedom
in
Caucus.
a fairly low turnout primary.
Yeah, so far as it goes, 11% of the people turned out. The Republican women, who only have 13 members in the Congress, really were putting a push on Joan Perry to win this. What does it say that she didn't do any better than she did?
Well, I do think that John is onto something with a lot of national conservative money. The Freedom Caucus was supporting Murphy, which is a little ironic since he was a sponsor of a version of Medicaid expansion, which is...
And then took his name off the bill.
And then took his name off the bill. So we're talking about how horrible that is all the time, and it's not a conservative issue. He was a sponsor of it and took his name off of it. Anyway, I do think that he was in the major media market. He was much better known. I'm not sure we can draw many conclusions from this other than that.
Okay, so President Trump's coming to Greenville July 17th. He's going to be at Minges Coliseum on the East Carolina campus. My understanding is tickets are already gone.
Correct.
How does that play into this soon-to-be September 10th election between Greg Murphy and Alan Thomas to win that seat?
What it means is the president has watched our state and this race very closely, and that means that he wants to come and gather those votes for his...
And whoever wins this seat is going to have to turn around and run again in March, Joe.
John likes numbers. Here's some numbers of this race. Less than 5% of the people in the 3rd District put Murphy in the House. Less than 5%.
Well, 11% of the registered voters turned
That's
out.
registered, but not eligible.
Yeah. Right.
But
only the people who could have voted in the primary, I think.
Right.
So I mean, it's a disaster. What should have happened is we should have, within a week of Walter's funeral, had his wife appointed to fill out his term and then go on with a regular issue.
Boy, that ends up another can of worms. We're going to switch over and ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. So, Chris Fitzsimon, I'm starting with you.
It hasn't got much attention. Senator Phil Berger, one of the appointments he made in his appointment bill to the Environmental Management Commission is former Secretary Don Vandervaart, a very controversial figure. I think you'll see a lot of publicity about that. A lot of people are upset about that.
All right. Brenda Pollard, tell us something we don't know.
I have learned just this morning that House Bill 655 will be on the floor for a vote on Monday.
And which one is that?
That is the
Medicaid
Carolina
expansion?
Care
Okay.
proposal.
Medicare expansion.
Yes.
Joe Mavretic, tell us something we don't know.
The hospitals have so much problem with money coming in and all. We ought to look at how much they have reserved for their contingencies, because I'm told that some of them have twice the rainy day fund of the state of North Carolina.
Wow. John Hood, tell us something.
There's a brewery in Utah that makes something called Polygamy Porter, sort of a tongue-in-cheek name based on the history of polygamy. It's available in lots of states, but not in North Carolina, where our ABC Commission refused to allow the product to be sold because polygamy is illegal. They didn't get the joke. But government bureaucrats often do not.
We have been doing this show now for almost 21 years. That's the most outrageous thing.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. That's the most outrageous thing I think you've ever told me. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter, give your feedback, and read my weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we invite you to join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the polygamy porter or the spin.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Life's busy, but you're in control. As an electric cooperative member, you have access to lots of tools to help manage your home energy use and budget, so you can focus on what's most important.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.